Hi everyone, I'm Michelle with the Sleep Coach School. Welcome back for another open class. This is open class 130. So before I get started, just a reminder that if any of you are looking for additional support with your insomnia recovery, head over to the sleepcoachschool.com. We've got several different coaching options there to support you. So with that, let's take a look at some of the different questions that have been sent to us by the community this past couple of weeks. All right, our first question is from Silvia. He says, I started taking sleeping pills in 2019, and in 2020, my kids were telling me I snore so loudly that it's like I'm gasping for breath. So I went into a full panic attack. I was scared of sleeping and went to the doctor. He said I may have sleep apnea, and I didn't want to sleep. But then, when I wasn't sleeping, I took sleeping pills. When all of that stopped working, I became so scared and anxious of not sleeping anymore. I think and believe that I will never sleep again because I've trained my brain this way and I don't know if I can turn it around. I feel so hopeless, but your channel is helping me understand more about insomnia. My big question is, how can I teach my brain that it's okay to sleep again? I know that I brought this on myself by not wanting to sleep. Will I ever sleep again? I haven't seen anyone on the channel who didn't want to sleep because of fear of sleeping. So thank you for sending this question in, Sylvia. Well, first of all, before I get started answering this question, I want you to know that as always, nothing here is medical advice. And please see your doctor when it comes to issues like sleep apnea, since that's not something that we can provide direct advice about. With that said, I can address some of your concerns and fears around not sleeping and hopefully provide you with a couple of steps that can help. So, first and foremost, what you're describing is actually called somnophobia, which is the fear of sleep or the fear of falling asleep. So, you're not alone in this. Several people actually struggle with this. And it's actually very logical to be afraid of sleeping when you've had the experience of sleep apnea or suddenly waking as you're gasping for air, like you described, or even having a panic attack. So, anytime we feel like this intense loss of control, like you've experienced, the very natural response to have is one of fear. And so, I think it's important to know that it is normal to feel this way, and there's really just nothing unusual with the way that you're feeling. It's important to know that. And, we can have so many different manifestations of fear around sleep. When it comes to insomnia, the fear can look different for everyone. The fear of being awake at night, the fear of experiencing anxiety, fear of sleep itself, like you were describing. For me, it was fear of experiencing certain hyperarousal symptoms that I was experiencing, my twitches and my jerks. I was terrified of these physical sensations, and mostly because I didn't understand what was causing them and where they were coming from. And so I was really, really scared all the time. And I completely understand, the pain and struggle of being afraid of something that you also have to face every single night, and how difficult that can be. But the good news is that regardless of where this fear is being directed, it's really the same mechanism in the brain that's at play. So just as another person's brain might be really afraid of being awake at night, your brain has decided that its detections and threat center has decided that sleep isn't safe. But I mean, really, the good news is that we can approach this fear of sleeping the exact same way that we would approach the fear of not sleeping. And that's why all of the different teachings here on this channel will apply equally to the issue that you're experiencing, because really fundamentally, this is about our brains learning fear and how we can work with our brains so it can unlearn fear. We can teach the brain that it's okay to sleep again. And we do that by taking advantage of how our brain works. So, our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors actually change the structure and the function of our brains. And that means that we can always create change no matter how long we've been feeling stuck in fear, whether it's insomnia or whether it's somnophobia. And so the first thing that I would say to you is actually to challenge the belief that you will never sleep again. I noticed that that was part of your question and what you wrote. And it can be really helpful to start to notice when you're telling yourself that you will never be able to sleep again, and just notice it and say, oh, there's that belief again. And maybe see if you can replace that belief by something like, I might be struggling a lot right now, but I know that this can change. And so sometimes that can be helpful, because what we believe is possible during this whole process, it does matter, and it can help us, or it can start, or it can hold us back a little bit. So I would see if you could challenge one of your core beliefs around not being able to change your sleep. The second thing is really to know that your brain has learned fear, and the same way that it learned fear, it can unlearn it. And while this takes time and it takes repetition, this is absolutely possible. So, the starting point to all of this is really understanding that the more we try to avoid or not have this fear, a lot of the times the fear becomes actually amplified. And a big reason for this is that this fear that you're experiencing is a signal from your brain, from that threat detection part of your brain, trying to warn you of something that it feels is dangerous in an attempt to keep you safe. And the more we try to resist that fear, which is that signal, or we try to repress it or not experiencing the fear, the brain will actually start to make the fear more and more amplified, because it really thinks it's trying to warn you of something that's dangerous. And so the first step of all that is to really understand that fear is a signal coming from your brain to try to keep you safe, and to see if you can actually allow yourself to hear and feel this signal, because the brain really wants to be heard in this sense. Um, See if you can allow yourself to feel the fear, and see if you can observe it. And for me, it sometimes even helped to talk to the fear while it was happening, to say something like, okay, I see that my brain is really afraid right now. And this makes sense given everything that I've experienced. This makes sense, and it's okay. And I'm going to allow myself to feel this fear, and to know that I'm still safe in this moment, even though I feel this fear. So that can start to help, and also send a bit of a safety cue to the brain in those moments as well, which over time helps reduce that fear. So one other thing I wanted to touch on was that you had mentioned that you felt that you brought this on yourself by not wanting to sleep. And I just wanted you to know that none of this is your fault. And that as insomniacs or people dealing with sleep issues, we often really believe that what's happening to us is our fault, or we take on some of this shame around this. It's so easy to do, to blame ourselves in this process. But none of this is your fault. None of this is anyone's fault who is experiencing insomnia. And if you can, see if you can start to release some of that shame that might come along with this as well, and just and let it go, because um, you did not kind of bring this on, to yourself intentionally in any way. And so the last thing I would want to say to you, Sylvia, is another part of your question was mentioning that you hadn't seen any other people on the channel experiencing the same fear of going to sleep. And there are actually two videos that I want to redirect you to on the channel. And the first one is Talking Insomnia number 54 with Marina. And so Marina was a guest that Daniel had on, who struggled deeply with somnophobia as well, and was able to overcome her struggle. And the second video is called Insomnia Insight number 394. And this is a video that Daniel did on somnophobia as a follow-up to his chat with Marina. So I wanted to highlight those two videos for you because I think you'll find them really helpful. All right. So with that, let's move on to our next question. Okay. All right, our next question is from Angeli. Hi, Daniel. Watching your video 314, I was in doubt about one point. I come from a history of severe insomnia for over 20 years. I have currently managed to reach a 6-hour sleep window. When bedtime is approaching, the drowsiness is so high that I keep blacking out. I can't keep my eyes open. Sometimes I even have to watch TV standing up. If I sit down, I'll black out. I don't sleep before the sleep window starts at 11:30 p.m. It's a tremendous effort. I keep looking at the clock every 5 minutes to see if I can go to bed now. Sometimes I've tried to sleep before my window, but I ended up waking up too soon. In other words, it's as if my body had already gotten used to the 6 hours of sleep. I accumulate a lot of drive to sleep, but I get very tired of this fight. What to do? Thank you very much for your guidance. I have applied them all and I feel I have gained a new life. This is a great question as well. So, Anjali, thanks for sending this in. So, sleep windows are, of course, a very common practice in traditional CBT-I. And here at the Sleep Coach School, we don't really emphasize the use of sleep windows as a necessary part of insomnia recovery. And one of the reasons is actually what you're describing here, that abiding by your sleep window has become like a struggle and a fight in and of itself. And our goal is really to see if we can leave behind any fight or struggle as much as possible. And I think the moment that something is feeling like a constant fight in this process, I think that means it's time to really reevaluate the role that it has in your insomnia recovery. So, one thing that might help with this is to actually reevaluate the intention that you are bringing forward to your sleep window. So, for example, if a sleep window is in place to help anchor a sleep pattern or to show your brain that it's okay to stop chasing sleep by spending excessive time in bed, this can be really helpful. But the moment that a sleep window becomes about really exerting control or it feels like a fight or a battle, it starts to lose a lot of its purpose and utility. So, one thing we talk a lot about here is the use of a timeless night. And so, again, sleep windows aren't wrong. And I just named a couple of scenarios where they could actually be quite helpful. One of the reasons why we tend to teach the timeless night approach is because it's all about less control and letting go. And those principles tend to be really helpful for sleep in general. And so really the way the timeless night works is by, picking a time in the evening, maybe it's 9 or 10 o'clock. And after that point, you really don't look at the time. So you don't have that set bedtime where you go to bed at exactly 11 or 11:30 p.m. You end up going to bed whenever your body is telling you it's sleepy enough to go to sleep. And of course, throughout the night, the goal during wake ups is also to not look at the clock as well and to keep the night as timeless as possible to remove the pressure of time as much as possible from the equation. Now, of course, you mentioned the fear of, waking up too soon and that your body might be accustomed to that set 6 hours that you're experiencing right now. And, that very well can be true. The body can get used to certain things. But also at the same time, we can change those patterns over time as well. Anything that you can do to reduce control and reduce the stress around sleep is going to have a positive impact on your sleep in the long term. So, just wanted to put those ideas out there, the idea of either letting go or reframing how you think about your sleep window so that it's no longer adding to the struggle. Okay, I hope that helps. Let's move on to our next question here. This one is from Lydia. She says, "Hi, Coach Daniel. Thanks for all these helpful videos. I've been having trouble sleeping. Most of the time I feel awake, but I'm having dreams that I can remember, even though I don't feel like I've slept." Yes, Lydia, this is very, very common. This is so common amongst people who are struggling with insomnia, and this is because of hyperarousal. Hyperarousal can make us feel like that we're not sleeping at all when we are actually sleeping, or it can produce a lot of really vivid dreams combined with shallow, really light, kind of restless sleep. And so we can end up having nights like you're describing where we feel like we haven't slept at all, but yet we know we remember having certain dreams. So it feels like this really strange combination to experience. But just know that it's very, very normal. And as we work on reducing hyperarousal through observing and allowing and responding in ways that send and reinforce safety cues to our brain, our hyperarousal will start to decrease as our brains start to unlearn all the fear it has around sleep and being awake at night. And as the hyperarousal starts to decrease, this is when we start to experience deeper sleep again. So just know that, and know that it's a process, that you're definitely on the right track. All right, let's keep moving. Our next question is from Sara. Sara says, "Hey Daniel, I understand that we are not able to produce sleep, so we should not even try, and we should delegate this to the mind and body. We should not force ourselves to be awake. Trying to be friends with wakefulness is that is a sleep effort. I listen to my thoughts, closing my eyes and resting. Somewhere in the back of my mind, my bed is associated with fear. I try to get out of bed, do what I enjoy, but when I go back, fear captures me again. The only thing I can do is self-kindness, which hasn't helped me so far. I don't have any CBT-I coach in my city. I know I am completely fine with respect to health, but my mind's confusion is the real cause. I took theoretical help from your channel, but practically I am failing. Please help." Sarah, thanks for sending in this question. What you describe is also a very common experience. This is actually an experience I had all the time myself during, especially during the early stages of my insomnia recovery, where I would get up at night to do something that I found enjoyable to befriend wakefulness. And, for the most part, this worked. I could get up, I could do something I really enjoy, I could feel calm in that moment and even enjoy the activity I was doing. But the moment I would go back to bed, all of my anxiety, all of my fear, it was like it was waiting for me in bed. And it felt very inescapable. So I struggled a lot with the exact same thing that you're describing. So when this happens, using an approach where you actually stay in bed, at least for a while, can actually really help. So there's two ways that staying in bed can help. And like when you are stuck in the pattern that you're describing. And the first is that these types of anxious thoughts and these fears that are waiting in bed for you, they really want and need to be heard. This goes back to the idea that these are actually signals that your brain is sending out, and your brain really wants to hear them because it really wants you to hear them, because your brain is trying to keep you safe. And oftentimes, if we don't listen, either those same signals are going to be waiting for us later, or those signals can even become amplified. So, luckily, there are multiple ways to befriend wakefulness at night. And one of them is actually to stay in bed and observe everything and allow everything that is coming up. So, if you're having anxious thoughts, this would look like choosing to stay in bed and choosing to drop into that observer role with yourself so that you can start observing all the different anxious thoughts that are coming up and allowing them to come up And again, knowing that when you're observing them, you are not your thoughts because you've taken that observer role. So if you're observing, that means you cannot be your thoughts if you are observing your thoughts. That's very helpful. And over time, as you do this type of mindfulness practice with yourself, you can even go into the next step, which is welcoming all of those anxious thoughts and feelings. And this was something I found very, very helpful for myself. And one of the reasons this works so well is because when we welcome our anxious thoughts and feelings, like we would as though we're greeting an old friend that we haven't seen in a while, it sends these automatic safety cues to our brain in that moment that what is happening is actually really safe. And as a result, the brain knows that having that thought or having that emotion is safe and that you are okay in these moments, and that helps to reduce hyperarousal. So that's the first way it can help by staying in bed is you're allowing, you're observing, and so you're hearing the signals, and eventually you can even start to welcome them to reinforce those safety cues for your brain, which is really helpful. And another thing that you can do to help kind of reassociate the bed with something more positive is you can start to intentionally create some new associations with your bed. So you can actually start doing enjoyable things in your bed other than sleep. You could start reading or watching movies in bed, either at night or during the day, to start to shift the connotation that your bed may have started to have in your mind. This is something that I did as well. Like so many of us who have a bit of experience with maybe a structured traditional CBT-I approach, we're always taught to, leave the bed and not to do anything in bed but sleep. But oftentimes, when we start to feel anxious or as though we have associated the bed with fear or anxiety, it can actually really help to intentionally do things that we enjoy in bed, both at night if we're awake, or during the daytime. And I know for myself, this actually really helped me feel more relaxed in bed. So, Sarah, I hope that helps. Those are our questions for today. As always, if you have any questions, shoot us an email. We love receiving them. And I look forward to next time. Take care, everyone.